Good evening. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting. Today is Monday, October 9th, 2023. It is 6:45 p.m. and we are in D205, Mount Lebanon High School. Present this evening is Mr. Galetko, Dr. Davis, Dr. Schumann, Dr. Fries, Mr. Volz, Mrs. Gensel, and myself, Ms. Olbrich. We have 3 policies for review tonight. We are starting with policy DJAA, Construction Contracts, Bidding and Awards, policy IJOC, School Volunteers, and policy IHBH, Charter Schools. Dr. Fries.
Thank you. So the first one, which is DJAA, is Construction Contracts, Bidding and Awards. And for this particular policy, we are only recommending small changes to language, just some updates from the last time that it was reviewed in 2021, including the threshold amounts for projects from $21,300 to $22,500 and $11,500 to $12,200. And that is under section of the policy number 6. And other than that, the other comments are just very small, more like editorial comments rather than significant changes.
And why were the threshold amounts increased?
So they are increased yearly by the Department of Labor. I believe that is Act 90 of 2011. So it, just like the Act 1 index, it uses the Consumer Price Index and another amount of measure to make that up. So I was going to ask Mr. Volz that would it be better to put the Act 90 language in there because this threshold changes every.
Yeah. No, it's
what the language does state in there, it states the original numbers, the 18,000, but then it says as adjusted each year.
Okay.
So last time we reviewed this in 2021 or so, we put in the 2021 numbers just so you'd have a reference if you looked at it.
Sure.
And that's why we changed it for 2023 for the numbers that they are there. But the policy itself at the beginning says, you know, as adjusted by the school code. So
Okay.
we don't need to do this every year.
Got it.
But if you happen to look at it, it just says for 2023,
Right.
it's these numbers.
And that's usually the first of the year the Department of Labor comes
Yeah,
out
so
with
it's going to
this.
be good for a couple of months, then it'll change.
Right.
all right. Any questions, Mrs. Gensel? I don't. We're good to move this forward for a vote next week? Great. All right. IJOC, School Volunteers.
For school volunteers, there's some significant changes to language to get us current with the current practices of school volunteers. The last time this policy was updated was in October of 2015. So you will see that the beginning of the changes come under definitions where it specifies that a volunteer is not a district employee. And then in addition to that, it gives examples of how volunteers can be used in the school, including but not limited to classroom celebrations, school assemblies, school concerts, reading to students, collecting tickets at sporting events, working concession stands, participating in career days, etc. And then the next section where you see some more substantial change is under the policy, specifically under number 7, where it adds some additional language about how volunteers are permitted to access, review, disclose, or use confidential student information under the area of unless the supervisor has determined that such access is necessary for the volunteer to fulfill their responsibilities. And that volunteers will with access to confidential information shall maintain the confidentiality of that information in accordance with district policies and procedures and applicable law. And if a volunteer has questions about confidentiality of student information, the volunteer shall consult with the building principal. Under the same number 7, it takes out some language in regards to just confidentiality. The information at the top clarifies it further. In addition to that, we have added numbers 8, 9, 10, and 11 under this policy, where it talks about that if a volunteer has reason to suspect child abuse, that they shall report suspected child abuse in accordance with applicable law, board policy, and administrative regulations. That volunteers shall attend orientation and training sessions as appropriate to their volunteer service. That the district shall provide liability insurance coverage for volunteers appropriate to their roles and risk management needs. And that prior to participating in student activities that are in duration of 10 hours or more, they will undergo a test for TB when required by the accordance of the Public Department of Health.
quick question about that one. Does prom fall under that?
I don't believe that they volunteer for 10 hours or more. Typically, they do like a smaller stint, so they won't have to have a TB test for that.
And back to the, can I ask a question about number 7?
Sure.
What, I'm trying to think, what kind of volunteer or information, like allergy information, like HIPAA, that's the only one I can think of.
That's
Volunteers would be
primarily
privileged.
it, because they're limited to the work that they're doing. For instance, if it was a student with an IEP, they're not going to be receive that information. But say they had an allergy and they were on a field trip and they needed to know that the student may be allergic to bee stings or something like that, that's when we would let them know.
I would offer to you as well, in the middle schools, we have volunteers serve as writing coaches. They come in and help.
Sure, I do, yeah.
So it is possible they may see a grade on a particular assignment that they're helping the students, so that grade would be considered confidential information.
Right, true.
And then the next section where we see some changes is under program volunteers, where you'll see that we took out the number 2, which relates to tuberculosis, and that was, as you can remember from before, is now under number 11 of the policy. And then we've also added some additional areas under program volunteers. Number 6, which is a student 18 years of age or older who is volunteering for an event or activity sponsored by the school in which the student is enrolled and occurring in the school grounds, shall not be required to submit certifications except when the event or activity is for children in the care of child care service, or the student will be otherwise responsible for the welfare of a child. And then number 7, that they shall report to the superintendent or designee in writing within 72 hours an arrest or conviction required to be reported by law. This is just to make sure that if you are a volunteer and you've been arrested, that we're notified of it so we can take proper precautions. And you'll also notice in that area that there's some stricken language, which is just clarified better based upon current law at the top for number 7.
And how is all this going to be communicated out to the volunteers?
We will create an administrative regulation that talks about these different pieces.
Okay.
We have to share with administration first, and then we'll create a process and a plan for submitting this information to our volunteers.
Great.
And then the next changes come under administrative or administration responsibility, where you will see an addition of 7 items. The first one being information submitted by volunteers in accordance with this policy shall be maintained centrally in a manner similar to that for employees. Superintendent or designee shall review the information to determine if the information is disclosed that precludes service as a volunteer. So for instance, for this one, say for instance somebody's background check comes back and there's a concern, it would come to my desk, I would consult with legal, and we would make a determination if the person should be volunteering within the school building. The next one is number 3, which is each building principal or designee shall be responsible for training the volunteers to perform with specific duties associated with their assignments. And then each building principal or designee shall assume general authority and responsibility over the volunteers performing services of any kind or on behalf of the school, including without limitation responsibility for overseeing the filing of criminal history reports, child abuse clearances, and volunteer affidavits. Number 5 is no such procedures adopted by the schools within the school district shall be inconsistent with the terms and conditions of this policy. 6, all such procedures adopted by the schools within the school district shall be subject to the approval of the superintendent or their designee. And then each volunteer shall affirm in writing that he or she has been provided with a copy of and has read, understands, and agrees, and then thus complies with this policy.
I have one change on that last one.
Okay.
Each volunteer shall affirm in writing that they have been provided.
So we'll fix it.
I'm just gonna track that change. Okay.
Mrs. Gensel?
I think, sorry, I think it's good.
Okay. All right. We'll move that forward for a vote as well. And moving on to policy IHBH, charter schools.
So for the next one, charter schools, you will see some just general updated language under the definitions. Where you see the bulk of the updates is really going to come under under transportation, where it talks about how transportation will be provided to charter school students. It states that the district shall provide transportation to resident students attending a charter school located in the district, a regional charter school of which the district is a member, and a charter school located within 10 miles outside the district boundaries in accordance with district requirements established for district students. And then transportation shall be provided to charter students on the dates and periods that the charter school is in session, regardless if the transportation is provided to district students on those days. And then non-resident students shall be provided with transportation only to the extent required by applicable law. The next, go ahead.
I do have a question for Mr. Galetko on this one. How many students do we pay for transportation for?
I'll have to check, Ms. Alberg. It's not a huge amount, I will tell you. There are 36 currently enrolled. I believe we're only transporting ones currently with IEP, which
Okay.
is about 9.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
The next section that has substantial revisions is participation in district programs. This particular section goes into detail about extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletic programs for students that are enrolled in charter schools. And in this section, before it was maybe like a paragraph, now it just gives some additional information about the board shall not provide individual transportation for students enrolled in charter schools who participate in district's extracurricular activities or interscholastic athletic programs. When the district provides transportation to and from an away competition, game, event, or exhibition and requires district students to use district transportation, charter school students shall be required to use the transportation provided by the district. The board may require the charter school to pay the cost of the expenses for the students' participation in the district's extracurricular activities or interscholastic athletic programs. A charter school student may only participate in extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletic programs at the school building closest to the charter school or at the school building the student would be assigned if he or she were enrolled. And we have to change that too. They were enrolled in the district. The following conditions shall govern participation in the district's extracurricular activities and interscholastic athletic programs by eligible charter school students who shall be a resident of the school district, meet the required eligibility criteria, maintain appropriate insurance coverage consistent with the coverage requirements for district students, comply with board policies and school rules and regulations regarding extracurricular activities, interscholastic athletics, and student discipline, comply with policies, rules, and regulation of the activities governing organization, meet attendance and reporting requirements established for all participants of the activity or program, meet the requirements for physical examinations, physical fitness, and any height or weight restrictions, and comply with all requirements and directives of the district staff, coaches, and administrators involved with the extracurricular activity or interscholastic athletic program. And any student who elect to attend charter schools shall not be permitted to participate in district curricular programs. And that is the extent of the revisions. The last time that this policy was revised was 2011.
Is this basically what we're already doing?
Yes.
Okay. That makes that easier.
Yes.
So update policy. Okay. And this hasn't been an issue with participation in sports or trying out for the play and the musical or any of those things?
It has not.
So a student who wanted to participate, say, in the orchestra, but if there's a requirement that they take the class,
It's
they,
a curricular program, they would not be permitted.
okay.
We had the same question come up recently about Parkway. It's a curricular program, so they would not be permitted.
Okay. Any questions? All right, we are good to move this forward and vote next Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any comments or questions from the audience? Seeing as as we have no visitors. We just have Mrs. Burdick, who joined us this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned.